Hi, welcome to this video session. In this video, we'll be looking at some of the points and some of the preparation strategies which every fresher who is appearing for some kind of technical interview should mandatorily follow so that he can crack the technical interview with the flying colors. So let us move ahead and see one by one what all topics we're going to discuss and what are the essential topics which every candidate has to focus on. So basically every candidate has to understand what exactly the purpose of interview. So when we take an interview, here we are talking about technical interview. The prime objective of any technical interview is to see whether the candidate possesses programming ability and then does he have an ability to solve a programming problem. So make sure your problem solving skills and programming ability is thoroughly brushed up. At the same time, the technical interviewer generally sees and generally also assesses how well you are versed with IT trends. In order to very quickly get a good idea about the candidate, most often the technical interviewers ask you about candidates' projects. That could even include mini projects or some kind of hobby technical projects, which generally the candidate mentions in their resumes. So they give a glimpse to the technical interview about your ability to work in a team, especially in a technical environment where you're supposed to share your ideas with your teammates and how you work, what are your project ideas, are you actually solving a problem. So there are a lot of various factors related to projects which are assessed during an interview. So we will see how and what exactly about projects is checked in your interviews in a later part of this video. At the same time, interviewer also focuses on your communication skills, more oriented towards a technical communication, and he would also at a times make sure that the candidate who has appeared for technical interview possesses fundamental knowledge of core domains. And when we talk about core domains, every branch have their own core domains of it. For example, a computer science student might be expected to know some of the fundamentals in operating system and computer networking, while as an electronics and telecommunication background person might be expected to know something about communication fundamentals or information theory. So as another, suppose if your TI is after a coding round, for example, most of students nowadays get a call after some competitive programming round. For example, may it be a code TCS Code Vita or some Infosys Hack Within Fee kind of tests. So if you are in technical interviews after the coding round, then make sure you are well prepared to explain your solution to the problems which you gave in the coding round. At the same time, you should be even well prepared to suggest even a better solution if it exists for a problem which you attempted in a coding round. And make sure what is the solution which you gave in a coding round, you are well aware about its algorithmic approach, the data structures you have used, and the complexity analysis of your solution. For example, interviewer might ask you like, is your complexity of your code which you suggested, is it O of n or O of n square, or is it in a logarithmic complexity? So better you brush up your algorithm skills as well and analyze your solution well before you even appear for the coding round. What I was trying to say is well before you appear for coding interview. And make sure whatever the language which you have chosen as a programming language for giving a solution to the problems in coding round, you have a proper justification to use that. For example, sometimes interview might ask you why Python, why you attempted the problem in Python, why not Java, because usually the language which you use and the language which you mention in your resume generally conflicts. Students tend to do that. Students do mention Java their expertise, and they write a code in Python just because some built-in methods within a Python or some kind of syntactic advantage or some third-party library uses in a Python might give them advantage in coding round. So you should be able to explain that, and be prepared to write the code again on a whiteboard, or they might even ask you to type it and rerun. In cases where sometimes they are suspicious about whether you are the one who wrote the code during code round, they might ask you to write a code on whiteboard. So be prepared for even for that. Generally, when these competitive programming rounds allow you to attempt the rounds at home at your leisure, then sometimes students do refer to some third-party code snippets and some third-party libraries. So you should have a very clear understanding of those third-party code snippets, and you should also be able to defend why you have used it instead of writing your own code. And coming to the resume, some of the very technical aspects which are to be very well taken care of, specifically when you're putting them on resume, is the first thing. What you will ensure is you'll only mention what you know very well. Don't put any language or any technology or any framework or any project which you are not done, or which you are not able to talk much on that. Mention 2 to 3 programming languages in order of proficiency level. For example, generally it is good to mention a language which you are very well versed as a first language. For example, it might be Python, Java, C, C++ in that order. And don't overhype your projects and technical achievements unless they are. And mention your projects and mini projects unambiguously in simple words. Include the broad domain in which your projects are, and also the technologies your projects involve. And generally it's a good idea to mention some latest technologies in your projects if you are using them in your projects. Mention valid internships, workshops and certificates, and be clear about them. When I talk about valid internships, workshops and certification, they should be a credible organizations. So maybe a small organization which is properly registered, which has a proper website and email IDs, and if required, the interviewer should be in a position to verify your internships, workshop certifications and other. Avoid complex words and descriptions in your resume. Moving ahead, let me move ahead. So what are some of the tech topics would interviews usually focus during your interview? Core subjects of non-CS and IT. Data structures. Yes, you have to prepare data structures. You have to also prepare analysis and design of algorithms. When we talk about data structure analysis of algorithms, your fundamentals have to be very absolutely clear, usually which involves the complexity analysis, the complexity of specific algorithm, or what are greedy method, what is divide and conquer, what is dynamic programming. And when we talk about data structures, specifically when to use stack, when to use queue, what is the insertion complexity of nodes in a tree. So all data structures, CRUD operation complexities a candidate must know. Databases, SQL is very essential and a must. And if you are aware of NoSQL systems like Mongo, Cassandra, and some kind of new SQL type of database, it's a big plus. And have a good understanding of OS and networking, especially application layer protocols, that's a big plus. And having web technology fundamentals nowadays is a prerequisite. And along with these tech topics, make sure that you are very well aware of agile methodology and testing and quality assurance fundamentals. So what specifically in a data structure? Types of data structures, where and when to use specific data structure. A good programmer or a good technically strong candidate always knows where and when to use a specific data structure. For example, there might be a problem where using a stack is better and efficient than using a queue. So you should be able to identify such situations. Pros and cons of each data structures which you have studied in your regular curriculum. Example uses of data structure, and time complexity of CRUD operations. When we say CRUD, C stands for create, R stands for read, U stands for update, and D stands for delete operation on data structures. Specialize in advanced structures may not be a must, but knowing them is definitely an advantage. Let's see ahead. We have algorithms, fundamentals of algorithm design principles, algorithm analysis. Be clear about what is big O, omega and theta complexities, and what are the complexities of some standard sorting searching algorithms, and specialized searching and sorting algorithms with uses and time complexities, algorithmic approach towards problem solving in comparative analysis. Don't get surprised if the interviewer asks you to give a better complexity based algorithm for problems which are already solved during earlier coding rounds. Databases, we need to know what are types of databases and concepts regarding structure of databases and schema design. Indexing and SQL query design is very important when it comes to technical jobs, especially in IT industry, and having knowledge about finding out query performance of an SQL query is a very good skill for any student, especially if your projects are revolving more around the data. Then you will surely expect some kind of database related and SQL related questions. Stick to one of databases when you're going for interviews when you are at the fresher stage. So I generally prefer to recommend you to go for either MySQL or PostgreSQL because they're open source, and you get a lot of what I want to say is they are easily installed on your machines and you can work with them. If your data storage no SQL, then make sure you be in a position to explain what is MongoDB and what is Firebase. I've been seeing most of students are recently they are using Firebase. Be sure about what technology it is and how it stores the data, how it ensures the ACID properties of data transactions. So some of the fundamentals related to databases. Cloud-based database, knowing about these would be a big plus, but they're not that much essential. OS and networking, make sure fundamentals of operating system are clear, like for example what are kernels, what is multiprocessing, threading. TCP IP stack and famous application layer protocols. When I say famous application layer protocols, I would say HTTP, FTP, SSH, TLS and SSL. You need to know what exactly it is, and sometimes students fail to explain what exactly is HTTPS. It's not just security, it involves a lot of security, encryption, decryption. So study these protocols, at least the one which I have listed here, study them in very detail. When I say studying them, not study them in theoretical perspective, but understand how do I make an FTP connection, what is HTTP protocol, what are the HTTP primitives, for example get, post, put, delete, such kind of stuff I'm asking you to learn. TCP UDP connection primitives, yes. So that's it for OS and networking. And when it comes to web technology fundamentals, it's better you have a knowledge about web servers, what exactly are web servers, or if you can name few web servers like Apache, Tomcat or Glassfish or IIS, that would be a better that would make a better picture of you in front of interviewer. So make sure you know some of the web servers. So knowing what are websites, web applications, and knowing web services, especially REST APIs, is a very big plus. So if you can afford, make sure you quickly go through some other YouTube videos or some kind of documentation on REST APIs and find out what exactly they are. Swagger and API are some they are tools in REST API documentation. Knowing them is a plus, but once again it's not an essential here at this fresher stage. Software engineering fundamentals and principles, no need to say, every student usually goes through that, but some of the points which have to be prepared in a checklist mode is to make sure you know what is agile methodology, software testing and quality assurance principles, and standards, testing types and use cases, test cases and bug tracking. Be clear, at least be clear about how you're going to test your project or how you're going to manage and plan your project. Moving ahead, some of the books which I would specifically recommend for you for interview preparation, technical interview preparation. I would heavily recommend you to go through books at the URL which is available on your screen, which is books.goalkicker. And for algorithms, this is my favorite. If the reader is not much into algorithms, you want to develop some basic understanding of algorithm, it's very good book. So have a good knowledge of IT trends. When I talk about IT trends, as of this video, the trends are machine learning, AI and deep learning. Just a superficial knowledge, at least of a level where you can understand or speak the buzzwords in these technologies. Cloud computing, for example, when I say buzzwords in machine learning, some interviewer might ask you what exactly the supervised or unsupervised learning. You should be in a position to understand what exactly it is. At the same time, it's not necessary that you know all of these technologies. At least one or two or the one technologies which are very much used in your projects. Make sure you know what exactly those technologies are. Questions about projects. Some of the very specific questions which you can expect about projects could include what problem you are trying to solve in your projects, how are you solving, what approach you are following, and there could be various approaches to solve the problem of which you are attempting as your project objective. So an interviewer might be very curious enough to know alternate approaches and why you are not using that approach and why you are using the current approach which I mentioned. And sometimes you can expect a question which might confirm technical interviewer whether you are the one who is really solving the problem or you're just making up a project or you bought a project. This is not a good thing, but make sure your answer should convince technical interviewer that you are the one who is solving the problem. Components and modules within your project, be sure about that. Interaction between modules, for example, I have a database and I have a web server. How you plan to communicate? You need to know what kind of driver or protocol communication or network protocols you are using. Or for example, there may be a Google Firebase and you have mobile app, how you're connecting. Such kind of questions are very favorite of technical interviews. And main thing, sometimes you may be even asked to draw an architecture of your project. Make sure you are very well acquainted with the architecture of your project and the technologies used per module. For example, for database I may prefer NoSQL. For web I might prefer microservices like Spring Boot or some kind of cloud-based functional programming services, for example AWS Lambda, such kind of technologies. But of the project, I personally would recommend you to focus more on architecture of a project and to be very clear about your project goals and objectives, and be clear about how you are planning to test your project as well. So in short, when I say test your projects, how do you ensure the quality aspect of your project? Mockups and wireframes, very rare, but okay, if your project is primarily UI and UX based, then yes, someone who is interviewing you would be interested to know how your design or wireframes or mockups would look. So a sample project architecture which I usually ask my students to follow is such kind of architecture where it is all numbered. So by looking at this, it is very quite clear from where the project flow starts, how the data moves, what's happening where, and what the numbers, and it's also very easy to describe and to pinpoint and also to explain the project architecture to someone who is not well versed or who is not much aware of the technological concepts inside this, or maybe the person to whom you are explaining might be a technical interviewer testing your communication skills, and he might have asked to explain the project architecture. So non-technical questions. So some of the very non-technical questions, usually they don't pop up in technical interviews, but in some cases yes, sometimes technical interviews do have an HR people also part of that. So they might ask you some specific questions to know whether you fit into company's culture, adhere to company ethics, your relocation willingness, question about higher education and job opportunities. Be diplomatic when you're answering questions regarding higher education and other job opportunities, or even a better job opportunities. Sometimes people do check if you can manage stress, work-life balance, peer pressure, but generally they are non-technical. So moving ahead, so in a quick nutshell, the strategy which I would like to recommend to how to prepare is to do a SWOT analysis of yours. You must do a SWOT analysis. So in this, what you will be basically doing is you will be identifying your strength, weakness, opportunities and threats, and upon identifying those, you will make sure that during interview you will highlight your strengths a lot, and hide your weakness wherever possible, and drive the interview and create an opportunity and grab the opportunity. For example, interviewer might ask you about a concept which you are very technically weak to explain, so you explain that concept in such a way so that you are creating open-ended kind of questions by an interview, which gives you a very good chance to steer the interview the way you want. For example, I may ask you, for example, you are good Python programmer, but you are not much involved in your project. The interview asks you about your project. In that case, you know, the explaining your project is a weakness for you, so you would say that my project is so and so, it has following objectives, it involves much of coding in Python, and I am handling the Python and I am good in Python. That you can easily answer in this way. The moment you highlight much on Python, coding Python, the interviewer might be much tempted to ask you about Python as his next question. So make sure you create and grab an opportunity, and avoid threats in interview. So you remember, I do understand it's very difficult at a first to practice the skills, but usually when you practice mock interviews with your friends or with your guide or your other faculty, make sure you follow the strategy within this. So during interview, generally avoid something saying very bad or something which might be a threat for you. So this is it, which I highly recommend that you follow this strategy to prepare for your technical interview. Thank you. That's it for this video. So if you have any queries, get in touch with me on either on LinkedIn, Facebook or Twitter, and all the best for your technical interviews.